taking it to the game room, only to find it empty. He tries calling his friends, but no one picks up. Just then, he hears someone calling his name. He turns around to see his friends, who eagerly tell him he missed all the action. The beta bullies start bragging about how they just hooped some Gosayok Tech guys. They head inside, and as they climb the stairs they point out to Gene that while he might not be familiar with the Gosayok Tech guys, they're pretty tough, but not a match for them. As they head into the gaming room, they're shocked to find a bunch of people lying unconscious on the ground. The beta lackeys are blown away by the sight and quickly ask who took down all these Gosayok Tech guys. Our boy casually points out that he came looking for everyone and was jumped by these guys when they saw his uniform. The three of them are absolutely stunned to realize that our boy took out all the seamen single-handedly. After their mindless fun at the arcade, the group heads out to grab some grub. The beta bullies have brought the same delicious food Young-chun usually eats, but Orange Head forgets to grab drinks and decides to go get some as soon as possible. Young-chun decides to go with him, but Orange Head opts to go himself. As they start eating, he often feels proud and laughs about how they took down the Gosayok Tech goons. Orange Head agrees, saying the goons came in trying to tough but ended up getting beaten like dogs. Meanwhile, our boy looks at the tuna mayo food with no clue how to proceed. He watches as Jaehyung tears off the seal and pops the snack out of its wrapper. He mimics Jaehyung and starts to take a bite. While eating, he asks his friends who started the fight. Jaehyung explains that one of the goons was messing with Young-chun outside the game room, which triggered the whole scene. Our boy checks in on his timid friend, asking if he's alright. The friend says he's good because Jaehyung showed up to rescue him just in time. Orange Head then shares some advice, telling Young-chun that in situations like this, he should never back down. Young-chun looks a bit confused to hear this, so Orange Head explains that you shouldn't flinch in front of a bully. You need to make it clear you're ready for anything, or they'll just take advantage if they think you're scared. He often agrees, saying you've got to show you won't take any crap, or they'll just walk all over you. Young-chun asks what if they end up hitting him. Orange Head just shrugs and says they're going to try to hit him even if he's scared, but Young-chun worries they might hit him harder. Orange Head agrees, but he points out that if you don't stand up for yourself, you'll just be seen as a pushover, and that's worse than getting beaten up. Heat-chun also adds his 2 cents, saying he's seen this trick work before because no one wants to deal with trouble. Bullies usually pick on the quiet ones who never speak up. Young-chun stays quiet, probably realizing that he's always been picked on because he didn't stand up for himself. As they chat, our boy keeps munching on his delicious food. The scene then drifts to his past, where instead of fancy food, he was stuck with some mediocre curry and a piece of dry bread. At that time he had no choice but to eat it. What made it worse was that there were always strong guys around him, bullying the weak and taking their food. One day, a cocky guy demanded our boy hand over his food, but Gene wasn't having any of it, so he fought back and left a gruesome mess behind. His memory makes him reflect on how the same pattern of the strong preying on the weak seems to repeat itself, both in his past and present situations. That's when Young-chun finally musters up his courage and says out loud that he doesn't like either of the beta bullies. The two bullies choke on their food, their breath caught in their throats at hearing this. Young-chun continues, saying he hates them because they bully kids in class, including him. Orange Head looks curious and asks when they even bully anyone. He points out that they only joked around sometimes. Nothing more. The blondie also agrees, saying that they never physically hurt anyone in class or made anyone do their dirty work. Compared to some of the other guys, like Kisukim, they're practically saints. But Young-chun stands firm, saying that even though they might just be joking or playing rough, it's still a form of violence to others. The beta bullies are stunned because they are not sure what to think of it. Young-chun further continues, explaining that it's the same kind of violence no matter how big or small. He resents them for being so cruel without a shred of guilt. Once he is done speaking, he points out that since beta bullies told him to stand up for himself, he spilled everything he had in his mind to try it out. The beta bullies are completely thrown off by Young-chun's words. The blonde one is at a loss and says no one's ever told him anything like that before. He didn't realize people could see their actions that way and thought they were just joking around. The other bully also agrees, saying they figured it was okay since they weren't as bad as some of the others. Young-chun, still feeling nervous, explains that he was surprised by how nice the beta bullies seemed when he hung out with them. He guessed they didn't realize that what they were doing was a form of bullying. Feeling guilty, Orange Head quickly apologizes. The blonde also says sorry, admitting they're not sure how to fix things but at least want to offer an apology. On the other hand, our boy is still messing with his food. When he takes off the shell of his rice ball, it drops to the ground and he's totally bummed out to see his meal ruined. His friends don't really know how to react and they end up yelling at him when he tries to eat the rice ball after picking it up. In the bustling heart of the city, we find ourselves back at SW Corporation. There, we see that same woman who claimed to be Yona's cousin is sitting at her desk. Suddenly, Yona storms into the room, clearly fuming, and she yells this woman's name, Guy. The sassy lady looks up and smiles at Yona. But before she can say much, Yona cuts her off with a sharp tone, demanding to know if she met Jean recently. Guy tries to play it cool and reminds Yona that it was actually Yona who was tracking Jin's background because she was suspicious of him. Yona frustratingly admits that she did investigate Jean, but had promised him she wouldn't pursue it further. Now, she is also telling Guy to stop nagging our boy as well. Guy raises an eyebrow and reminds her that she shouldn't forget the kind of world they live in, especially given the recent kidnapping event. So, she makes it clear that they're not taking any chances, and our boy's background is a major concern. Yona insists that Jean wasn't involved in any of the recent trouble, but Guy quickly interrupts, saying that just because Jean helped with a rescue doesn't make him trustworthy. Guy's manager also chimes in, pointing out that Jin's identity is a significant issue for the school. They emphasize that a school affiliated with SW Corporation shouldn't have accepted a student with fake records, and they make it clear that they won't overlook this matter. Yona frustratingly grits her teeth while Guy just smiles with a hint of satisfaction. She explains that they might receive some good news soon. Curious, Yona asks what kind of news she is talking about. Guy's manager explains that Jin's records were restricted, so they had to consult higher-ups in their network to obtain more information. Guy looks at Yona with a challenging smile, asking if she's not curious about Jin's true identity. Yona firmly states that she doesn't care, emphasizing that Jean saved her, which is more than enough for her. Just then, the telephone rings, grabbing everyone's attention. Guy's smirk widens as she says it's time for them to hear the news together. She answers the call, and the caller announces that they have news to deliver. As Yona waits anxiously, Guy expresses hope that the caller will reveal information about Jean's identity. The caller responds that the higher-ups have decided that SW Corporation should refrain from any further inquiries into Jin's background. The announcement leaves Guy visibly pale, and the guard stunned as well. Her frustration boils over, and she starts yelling at the caller, demanding to know how they can simply let the matter slide. The caller makes it clear that, given the enduring relationship between SW Corporation and the government, they have decided to overlook the matter. The caller explains that Jean is estranged from his family due to an unfortunate plane crash and is essentially a young man who has found his way back home. They emphasize that it would be best to let him live his life without further scrutiny. The next day at school, Yona walks in with her escort, catching everyone's attention, including our boys who are curious to see them back after such a long time. Yona suddenly starts looking at them with a direct gaze, which makes Yongchun feel uneasy. She approaches him and simply asks if Jean isn't in school today. Yongchun, looking around for Jean, explains that he was just here. But Jiang explains that he just got called to the office a few minutes ago. As Yona and her escort, Xiaoju, settle into their seats, her escort reveals that the chairman is at the school right now. Yona is surprised to hear that her grandfather is at the school, and wonders why he didn't inform her of his visit, and if Jean might have gone to meet him in the office. In the office, we finally meet the old man we've been hearing so much about. He's thrilled to finally meet our boy in person, especially since our boy had previously turned down a meeting. So he came by himself to thank him for saving Yona. Our boy responds that there's no need for thanks. He was just trying to rescue his sister, and Yona happened to be there too. The old man acknowledges that he knows, but he still wanted to express his gratitude for saving his granddaughter and apologize for involving his sister. Our boy clears things up again, letting the old man know that he doesn't need to worry about that since Yona has already apologized. The old man stays silent after hearing this, and our boy starts to head into the classroom. That's when Grandpa finally asks if he will become Yona's bodyguard. Not surprisingly, he flatly refuses and makes it clear that this isn't something an average teenager like him can handle. The old man reminds our boy that an average teenager couldn't really handle a unit of kidnappers made up of former Special Forces soldiers either. Jean then points out that Yona already has an internal security team guarding her 24/7. The old man agrees, but says that a security team can't be with her at school. And besides, she wouldn't be able to live normally with a team trailing her all the time. He explains that Shakju was in charge of her security, but the recent incident made him realize he isn't the right person to protect her, so he's thinking of giving the job to our boy. Jean starts to walk away again, saying he can't help. The old man goes quiet for a moment and then says he wasn't just here to thank him for saving Yona. He also wanted to thank him for what he did 3 years ago. As soon as our boy hears this, he freezes and quickly turns back toward the old man. The old man keeps going with his thanks, saying he's wanted to express his gratitude for a long time, because without our boy's efforts, he wouldn't have had the Shancito see his son before he passed away. It's clear that Jean remembers what the old man is talking about, but he stays nonchalant, saying it was just another job. The old man insists it was a dangerous job that no one else would take on. Thanks to our boy's success in the mission, he was able to see his son again, and his son spoke about Jean often. The old man reveals that his son was worried and asked him to find out why our boy had become a mercenary. So, the old man tried to track him down, but couldn't find any leads. Now, as fate would have it, they're face to face, and he adds that Yona is his daughter. Jin's mind quickly flashes back to the past, recalling the man mentioning that he had a daughter around his age. Still, Jin makes it clear that he can't be Yona's bodyguard. However, he adds that he won't turn a blind eye if something happens to her. The old man is a bit taken aback, but then smiles and says that that would be more than enough. He then adds that there's one more thing he'd like to request. He points out that he would like to hear Jin's thoughts on the security team at SW. Jin asks what he means, and the old man explains that SW's security team is part of a long-standing and proud tradition. Maybe too proud for their own good. They believe that Yona's recent kidnapping would have been contained even without Jin's help. However, as SW continues to expand, the threats are growing, and their security division is lacking in innovation. The old man wants Jin's honest assessment of their skills, and it will be a paid assignment. Of course, Jin lets out a sigh, feeling like all of this is just a drag. He then finally heads back into his classroom. As soon as he enters, Yona greets him, but he clearly ignores her and walks to his seat as the teacher starts the class for the day. Jin sits quietly in his chair, thinking about the old man's words. He realizes that Yona's father must have died since the old man mentioned he'd seen his son before he passed away. The scene then cuts back to the past. We see Jin as a mercenary, with all the site workers gathered around eating. Jin is munching on some kind of food bar when a voice calls out to him, asking how a kid like him ended up working as a mercenary. It's clear this man is Yona's father. And after he sees our boy's face, he comments that he didn't realize Jin was so young. Jin quickly covers his face and starts to walk away, but the man offers him his platter full of delicious and appetizing food. He tells Jin to throw away his trash and eat this instead, saying that what he eats really matters at his age. Meanwhile, the other mercenaries chat about how their new client seems really wealthy and explain how they're building roads, a school, and a clinic in the town they're all stationed in. As they chat, Jin listens quietly. While he's on guard duty, the man walks up to him again, offering him a chocolate bar. Jin just looks away. Later that night, the man offers him food once more, but Jin turns away again. On a particularly rainy day, the man brings an umbrella and coat, but Jin refuses them as well. One day, as Jin is packing up his stuff to leave, the same man approaches him again. He says he'll miss having Jin around and invites him to stop by if he can, since they'll be there for at least another month. The man then tosses a bag to Jin, explaining that he's packed some snacks and basic medical supplies inside. Finally, Jin speaks up and asks why he's giving him all this. The question catches the man off guard, and he's surprised to hear Jin speak Korean. He adds that he tried speaking in Jin's native language and in English before, but didn't get a response. The man explains that he's giving these things because he has a daughter around Jin's age, and he reminds him of her, so he can't help but worry. Later, we found ourselves in a rundown place where conflict is ongoing. We then see Jin with his fellow mercenary. His fellow informs him that the town where Jin was stationed as a guard has been taken over by a resistance group. He explains that they were waiting for the foreigners to finish their construction so they could take over the buildings, and most of the people at the site had been killed. Shion is jolted out of his flashback by the sudden ringing of the bell, and he notices Yona calling out to him, asking if he's free right now. A while later, they're in the lounging area, where Seokju is bowing his head in respect and offering a late apology in person. Jin tells him there's no need for that, as he understands the reason behind his actions. Yona then says she's pretty sure Jin will deny it, and explains that Grandpa asked her to invite him on his behalf. Jin agrees without hesitation, leaving Yona quite puzzled to see that he actually agrees without protest for the first time. The scene then shifts to Jia, who is gritting her teeth in frustration. She's fuming mad that the higher-ups aren't releasing Jin's true identity. Just then, her manager enters and mentions that the same student has arrived, which shocks Jia a little. In the SW Corporation's men's locker room, Jin is getting suited up in the company's dress code. Seokju asks how Jin ended up landing a job with SW Corporation. The scene transitions to the past, where Jin is reviewing the records of all the security personnel working for SW Corporation. The old man had told him to spend a few days with the team and share his thoughts since arrangements had been made to accommodate him. It should be fairly easy for Jin to get a sense of the program. Back in the present, Jin tells Seokju that he simply wanted to experience what being in the security team is like, so ended up here with a job. Seokju wonders if that means Jin wants to be a bodyguard. Jin then asks if Seokju isn't joining the training. In response, Seokju explains that today's session is for Team 2, and he is part of Team 3. He adds that Team 3 escorts Yona exclusively, while Team 2 escorts Ms. Jia and her parents. The scene transitions to a training hall where all the personnel are sitting on the ground. One of the instructors introduces Jin to everyone, explaining that Jin will be joining them for the next few days. He's in the same class as Seokju, and the chairman has allowed him to participate in their program to learn about their field. One of the men raises his hand and asks if Jin is the one who handled the kidnapping situation with Seokju. The senior confirms that he is indeed the same person. Jin introduces himself and thanks everyone for letting him participate. As the students begin their training, we see Yona standing above, observing our boy. Seokju reveals to her that our boy is here because he wanted to experience what it's like to be a bodyguard. Or at least that is what Jin told him. Meanwhile, the guards are running down the halls, engaged in their training. As Yona watches our boy, she also notices someone else in the hall, and it's Jia along with her guard. Yona curiously wonders what she is doing there. Meanwhile, Jin is running across the hall with the other soldiers. The senior leading the pack takes a quick look back and sees that Jin is keeping up well, so he decides to pick up the pace, running even more intensely. After several rounds, all the soldiers are completely out of breath, and the senior looks utterly exhausted, as if he might faint any moment. Jin, however, looks as if nothing has happened, taking just a simple casual breath. The senior reveals to us that they've earned enough to make anyone faint, but Jin kept up the whole time and even looks like he could handle 20 more laps. They move on to other intense exercises, and Jin excels at those as well. From the sidelines, Yona is absolutely blown away by how Jin outperforms everyone, leaving them struggling to keep up. Meanwhile, Jia just sneers, saying it's just basic training and still Team 2 is falling way behind this kid. As our boy stands there, the senior is wondering where in the hell they found this kid. He's questioning if he's been trained somewhere before because he's just too good. Then the senior notices Jia standing nearby, and his face goes pale as soon as he makes eye contact with her bodyguard. He realizes he's going to catch flack from Jia and her bodyguard later for falling behind compared to a high schooler. Suddenly, one of the juniors raises his hand and points out that he's heard this student played a critical role in Miss Yona's rescue. So he wants to test the kid's skills himself. The senior gets angry and asks if really wants to spar with a high school kid, yelling at his junior for being out of his mind, but the senior finds himself completely blown away when the kid himself volunteers to fight and says he doesn't really mind. The senior, completely at a loss for words, scratches his head in frustration and reluctantly agrees. He tells his juniors to get the protective gear for our boy. Before long, our boy is decked out in his gear, and the other guy facing him gets suited up too. Yona wonders if this will be okay, and Seokju points out that it's hard to say, given how tough the other guys are. Even Jia thinks it would be pretty hilarious if this high school kid actually won. She mentions she's heard the kid has extraordinary fighting skills, but her bodyguard assures her that he's still no match for his men, because these guys have been highly trained in all sorts of combat long before they started working at SW. The senior tells both of them to just take it easy, especially telling his junior to go a bit easy on the kid, and the junior agrees. The senior then tells them to get ready, so the junior takes his stance and reminds our boy that he's not against those chumps he has beaten before, so he better be careful. Our boy doesn't even flinch at the jab and simply takes his own stance. As soon as the senior signals the start of the fight, the junior lunges at our boy with an incredible burst of speed and swings a punch right at his face, but our boy quickly steps back. The junior swings again with full force, but Jin dodges effortlessly once more. Yona, growing anxious, points out that the soldier wasn't supposed to go that hard during a sparring match. But the soldier, however, keeps coming at Jin, swinging his fists left and right. Jin continues to dodge every attack effortlessly. Then, Jin quickly kicks the junior's leg, causing him to stagger. Seizing the moment, our boy balls up his fist and throws a brutal punch, but the soldier quickly raises his hands to block, avoiding a direct hit. The fatty mocks our boy for his futile attack and gets ready to hit him with a punch of his own. But Jin quickly deflects the incoming fist and counters with a brutal blow right to the bastard's face. That display of power leaves Yona breathless, and even her guard finds it pretty impressive that Jin struck precisely where the fatty's face was exposed. As the fatty writhes in pain, Jin grabs him by the head and delivers a vicious knee smash to his face, leaving him bloody and beginning to collapse to the ground. Jia is absolutely blown away by what just happened. While Jin stands there as the clear winner, with his opponent slumped unconscious on the ground, he removes the protective gear from his head, and both the senior and the other soldiers are stunned by the turn of events. Seokju notes that they were clearly instructed to take it easy, but this was just too intense. Jia speaks up again, questioning if this kid is really the 19-year-old they claimed he was. Meanwhile, her bodyguard is fuming at the top of his head, as Team 2 is part of his crew, and he is not at all happy to see one of his soldiers going down like flies after being beaten by a teenager. The other soldiers drag their incapacitated buddy off the ground while Jin remains the center of attention. By now, the senior has no doubt about Jin's role in saving Yona from the kidnappers. Meanwhile, Jia's bodyguard is giving his soldiers death glares. They're all panicking, especially the senior, who's sweating bullets because he's sure he's in big trouble. Then, another soldier, Byeomsak Choi raises his hand and volunteers to spar with Jin too. The senior reminds him that they've already lost to a kid once and doesn't want to look foolish by losing again. But Byeomsak, brimming with confidence, says he's really itching to fight Jin after seeing his impressive skills. The senior points out that they can't all just rush at Jin, but Jin says he's totally fine and not exhausted at all. He even adds that he hasn't moved around enough to be tired. This freaks everyone out a bit because after taking down one of their top soldiers, he's practically saying he hasn't even broken a sweat. Seokju lets out a sigh, clearly not surprised by our boy's